Back to section 1. Now we go into the deposition and we talk about a very important topic that both Kyle and I as sportsmen,
Right.
yeah, as sportsmen, we would like to bring to light. It's a very important issue. The Prime Minister touched on it. It is the dispute between the Trinidad and Tobago Football Association and FIFA.
That has found its way in our local courts.
Correct. And we are very happy that we have our colleague, Mr. Matthew Gale, attorney at law, who is representing the TTFA.
Yeah.
Matthew, are you there?
Mr. Gale,
Are you hearing us?
Hearing me?
Yes, Matthew, we're hearing you.
how are you? How are you on this Sunday evening? Working hard as usual?
Well, trying.
Yeah, we see you in office right now, so hopefully you're not working too hard.
Well,
Matthew, you and I would know about football. Stefan has never tackled anything before.
Except for the law. Except for the law.
So perhaps you could help us tackle this issue today. Tell us, give us a factual background as to how
This
dispute arose, and then how did it find itself into the courts?
right. Okay, so, I mean, we know that there was an election. The TTFA had an election in November of last year.
Yeah.
There was a change of executive. The old president and so on was running, but was not successful.
Yeah.
That executive was changed. Round about March 17th, I think, the FIFA took the view that there was a need for them to quote unquote normalize, essentially for them to replace the executive with a body of their choosing to run Trinidad football. And having only been elected in November, unsurprisingly, the executive that had just been elected took exception to that, and we find us where we are.
What was their justification for that election? You and I know that an election is a democratic process. If that was the process, what was the problem with respect to these persons? What was their stated problem? Did they state it?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, they said that there was a significant amount of debt and not enough controls, as it were, and not a satisfactory plan for seeing the TTFA out of that debt. So,
Right.
So yeah.
So once this dispute arose and these facts arose, you guys went to court. You representing the TTFA. Your client, the president, the elected president, went to court. I think the matter was docketed before Justice Gobin,
initially,
correct?
right? And there was a judgment. Tell us about that.
Yeah, tell us about the judgment from Justice Gobin.
Yeah, so in fact there were two judgments, or two rulings as it were. There was an initial challenge by FIFA. FIFA said, unsurprisingly, that the local courts is not the proper forum.
Yeah.
They want us to go to a court which they had chosen previously, and they say the TTFA had agreed to use. That is the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is in fact not really a court, but a private arbitration body based in Switzerland.
Right.
So essentially, that was the first ruling. Justice Gobin agreed that the TTFA were right to come to Trinidad. Having done that, Justice Gobin gave the FIFA an opportunity to file a defense. No defense was filed, so the matter proceeded to trial, and then there was a subsequent ruling in favor of the TTFA after a trial.
And then stemming from that, FIFA would have appealed the issue to the Court of Appeal of Trinidad and Tobago.
Correct. So in fact, they only appealed the first issue, the issue of jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Of course, you will understand. I'm sure your listeners, your viewers will know that, or may not know that. Once the issue of jurisdiction was decided against the TTFA, which is what the Court of Appeal decided, the second judgment, as it were, fell away.
Yeah. Matthew, I mean, for our viewers, what does this mean for the? Does it have any meaning at all for the local jurisprudence or the local law in terms of sport law or even arbitration law? What does it mean? What is the impact of this?
Well, I guess it's going to be some time before we know what the real impact is. And as you know, Gal, likely as not, lawyers are going to disagree as to how profound or not the impact of this ruling is.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly, in my view, it is fairly significant. Who is to be the leadership of the TTFA is a matter which is prescribed in statute.
Yeah.
A statute of the Trinidad Parliament, it seems to my mind that it's almost goes without saying that the proper forum for the disputes which arise out of statutes of the Trinidad Parliament is the Trinidad courts.
It's part of a sovereignty and sovereign democratic state.
Well, you would think so, right? But
Yeah.
you know, and in a fairly careful and detailed judgment, Justice of Appeal Barrow, who gave the decision of the Court of Appeal, disagreed entirely and seemed to make short measure of those arguments and say, you know, fundamentally it's a matter of the Constitution sets out that you go to CAS, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
I don't know if that is the end of the story, but certainly as far as Trinidad law goes today,
Yeah.
that is the current and settled position.
But then it sets the stage for more and more sports disputes to be settled outside, I suppose, of our local courts.
Correct.
And more into the field of specialist arbitration courts, whether it be international or not.
Maybe selected by those international bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely, and as you will well know, I'm definitely a fan of specialist arbitration as a means of settling sports disputes.
We definitely
They
know
have their place.
Yeah.
But as do the local courts.
Yes.
And you know, if it is an issue that's bigger than football, if it's an issue that touches and concerns national sovereignty,
Yeah.
one would think that the courts are the appropriate forum, whatever the underlying subject matter of the dispute is.
Yeah.
But of course, yes, when there are detailed and complicated issues which relate to the discipline, then yeah, I think the specialist arbitration body is the correct place. And of course, CAS, being the administrative body, has access to specialist arbitrators from different disciplines. So, you know, it definitely has its advantages.
Yeah. Do you see, I mean, perhaps looking outside of the court ruling, do you see anything that maybe the Ministry of Sport or the government, perhaps from a political standpoint, or perhaps through legislation, could do to avoid this type of issue? Because this, I mean, regardless of the issues, this led to Trinidad and Tobago being blacklisted at one point.
Correct.
Well, I think they still are. And other issues which affected the game of football. I mean, ultimately, I think you, me, Stefan, everybody wants for Trinidad to play football on the national stage. Do you see any measures that could be implemented by the government to avoid a situation like this?
And to protect our association.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the difficulty is, and one of the quite clear implications of the decision of the Court of Appeal from Friday, is that the government is going to have to be very careful with what role it may want to play in football in Trinidad going forward.
Yeah.
The FIFA statutes, as well as the TTFA statutes, clearly state that both of those bodies are to be independent of any government, any politics, and so on.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult in a context where the local courts have said, no, you must abide strictly by the Constitution, irrespective of whatever implications it may have.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to see how you can sort of find any role for politics or politicians in the context and the background of such a clear and decisive ruling.
Now, the decision was only handed down on Friday, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Matthew, but there is a higher court. I'm not certain, have you gotten instructions at all, or have your clients indicated anything in terms of going to the Privy Council? Maybe appealing that decision?
I think certainly Mr. Wallace was contemplating, even before the decision was handed down, just exactly what it was that he intended to do.
Yeah.
I know there was a meeting of the membership scheduled to go on today. I certainly haven't spoken to him since that meeting has taken place, so I don't know what happened there. But certainly I know it was one of the things that he was considering. But, you know, I guess at the end of the day, I get the sense that there was also a waning sort of enthusiasm from Mr. Wallace. I mean, those are not my, you know, I don't know what his final decisions are.
Yeah, of course. But,
you know, I think...
It's a big decision. It's a big decision if you want to go to the Privy Council, obviously.
Absolutely. So I think, you know, you've got two very big forces, you know, acting against each other there.
Yeah.
What Mr. Wallace will decide in light of, you know, whatever advice he may get, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Matthew, I think we'll leave it there for today. The only thing is to have New City Chambers come up with a five-a-side, and Section 1 will come up with a five-a-side, and we settle the real dispute, Matthew.
Who is better?
Who's better?
We were planning to get a little football here today, but it didn't work out that well because as Kyle and I are cricketers, we don't have football, so
It reminds me of a similar challenge I once made, and I'm still waiting for that challenge to be accepted.
yes, Matthew, I understand.
We'll definitely pick you up on
We'll
that,
pick
Matthew.
you up.
Thanks for coming on, and we hope to have you on, perhaps with some more sports law. We know that's your area of specialty, amongst many other things.
Thank you,
All
Matthew.
right, guys.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Very interesting topic.
Very interesting.
A lot of ramifications to the Trinidad and Tobago Football Association, to football in general.
Yeah, I have always said that there is certainly a role for arbitration in sport law.
Yeah.
You don't want to get it, you want to settle conflicts quickly.
Yeah.
When it comes to sport. You don't want this to be dragging out in court. We have seen with cricket, with football, with table tennis, with many other sporting bodies, matters being litigated in courts, dragging on for a while. And what you have are athletes essentially suffering. And you have to also remember the lifespan of an athlete
It's very short.
is very short.
Correct.
A sprinter, maybe 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Cricketers are the same. Football, by the time you're 35, 40, depending on the sport, of course,
Yeah.
you're out of it. So you don't want to take away any time. And then you want athletes concentrating on the sport.
On the sport, not on
performing.
litigation.
Now what's
Not
going
on
on.
litigation.
So you really need some type of mechanism. FIFA, of course, provides International Court of Arbitration. But maybe Trinidad needs to look at having a specialist court
Yeah.
to deal with sport disputes and arbitration on the whole,
Yeah.
so that these types of disputes among associations can be dealt with very quickly.
Very quickly, with some degree of alacrity.
Alacrity, yeah.
Now, thank you very much. Now, let's take a very quick break. We're going to come back with our segment Soapbox.